In July, I spent a week at Clarion University for the 2016 Honors Program Summer Academy for Fisheries and Wildlife Biology. I worked with professors and other high school students and college freshmen on various research projects throughout the week. On Wednesday, we went to the state game lands nearby in the Allegheny National Forest to spend a few hours studying and banding birds. In this presentation, I will inform you about the effects of Shelterwood forest management on the birds of the Allegheny National Forest. There are over 200 species of birds in the Allegheny National Forest, and in just a few hours we saw and heard 33 of them. Here's the list we compiled throughout the morning of the birds we got to study firsthand. Our research question was, how are songbirds affected by shelterwood cutting in the Allegheny National Forest? And our approach to answer this question was to look at 3 species over a period of 7 years to see how their population data fluctuates. The site we studied was in the Allegheny National Forest. The first cut was in 2004, and there have been 2 cuts since then. And this picture on the right here is our group with Scott Stolson. He's a wildlife biologist who specialized in ornithology, and him and his team kind of led us through the day and taught us what they do and why they do it. As I said, the site we visited was shelterwood cut, and shelterwood cutting is the removal of all trees except a few for shade and windbreak. It allows for almost full sunlight on the forest floor, which increases seedling growth production. As many as 10,000 pine seedlings per acre can come back after an area is shelter cut. The technique we used was called mist netting. It's one of the most common research techniques used in ornithology. It utilizes nylon or polyester nets suspended between 2 poles that are near virtually invisible, so the birds don't see them and they fly into it and get tangled up until you come and remove them. It doesn't hurt them, it just keeps them trapped there until one of Scott's team members would untangle them. After we captured the birds and freed them from the nets, they're placed into cotton bags that we use to carry them back to Scott's truck. And back at his station, we identified, weighed, and measured the birds, and then we placed an ID band loosely around their legs, and then we free them back into the wild. So Scott gave us some data from the past 7 years. We decided we were going to compile all of that data with the data that we collected the morning that we spent with him, and we just made an Excel spreadsheet and we calculated the average number of birds per day. So you can see from 2010 to 2013, the number of birds was rapidly increasing per day, and then after that it kind of started to drop off, and that kind of makes sense because pine seedlings tend to grow about a half a foot a year. So if the first cut was made in 2004, by 2013 those pine trees are probably about 5 feet tall. So that underbrush that the birds like and feed off of is really starting to thin out by that point, so that explains why it would start to drop after that. So since every species has different needs and habitats, we decided that that graph of every species over those 7 years wasn't specific enough and didn't give us enough information. So we decided to focus on 3 species of birds. We used data from the same site. We used annual counts from 2010 to 2016, except for 2015, and that's the data that Scott gave us. For each species and study year, we took the total count for that species over the total count of all birds, so that gave us the relative abundance of that bird over time, and then we plotted the relative abundance and the year to examine trends during forest succession. So the first species we focused on is the common yellowthroat. It's a small songbird with a wingspan of 6 to 7.5 inches. It lives anywhere from northwestern Canada to Florida. Its habitat, it prefers dense scrub with tangled vegetation over open canopy. Its diet consists of insects near the ground like beetles, ants, and grasshoppers. It migrates to Mexico and Central America during the winter. Our next bird is the chestnut-sided warbler. It's another small songbird with a wingspan of 7 to 8 inches with a range consisting of the eastern half of North America. It can live in both open canopy forest and open scrub. Its diet mainly consists of insects, and it migrates to Central America for the winter. Our third bird is the song sparrow. It's another small songbird with a wingspan of 7 to 9 inches, and it's another widespread bird. It lives anywhere from southern Alaska to North Carolina, and its preferred habitat is open canopy and old forest. Its diet consists of seeds and fruit, some insects like dragonflies and midges, and it migrates to the southeast United States. So we decided to plot the relative abundances of these birds over the 7 years of data that we have. And you can see the common yellowthroat, which is the blue line. That's the bird that prefers the dense forest, like the undergrowth. So you can see that one's kind of declining over the 7 years that we looked at, because as those pine seedlings start to grow taller and taller, they block more sunlight, and that dense undergrowth starts to thin out over time. The chestnut-sided warbler was the bird that can kind of live in either open canopy or the dense undergrowth, so it kind of makes sense that that bird was kind of thriving over those years in either of those. The song sparrow was the bird that prefers the old forest open canopy, so it kind of makes sense why that bird is really not a high percentage of our birds that we found over those 7 years. So as you can see from that graph and from the species that we talked about, every bird is different. Every bird has different needs. It wants a different habitat, it has a different diet. So forest management is never an ideal situation for every single species. However, it does provide different periods of growth for each species as the forest succession goes on. Shelterwood cutting requires continued management, because you can't just cut an area once and just let everything grow back and never touch it again. You kind of have to keep up with it and keep cutting it back down so you get that dense undergrowth period. So our final question to you is, why are birds and forests important to conserve? Everyone will have different answers to this question, but I think everyone would agree that it is important to conserve these things, and it's important to our environment and our future. So we would like to thank Scott Stolson and his team, Dr. Reschler in the honors program, Andrew, Megan, and Taylor for kind of helping us through the week and helping us get settled in on campus, and Professors Turner, Register, and Theodore for working with us and helping us to do this research all week.